Welcome to SVG-TV News for Thursday, December 17, 2020. I am Rochelle Batiste with the details. Prime Minister Dr. Gonzalez has been pointing out to the United Nations the difficulty faced by CARICOM countries in accessing COVID-19 vaccines. Speaking at the 31st special session of the UN General Assembly on December 3rd, 2020, PM Gonzalez, who asked to join the discussion on COVID-19 and transforming tourism, said that like many other countries, St. Vincent and the Grenadines has felt the impacts, which continues to shrink its budgets. He said that while there is now a vaccine available, accessibility for small countries is now an issue.
It is critical that every person in the world be able to access COVID-19 vaccines. The Caribbean community supports and welcomes the COVAX facility. We commend the foresight and human ingenuity behind the creation of not only the vaccines, but also a system aimed at their fair distribution. Similarly, the COVAX Advanced Market Commitment, AMC, is a welcome financing instrument to support the procurement of vaccines for low and middle income countries. However, the metric used for selecting countries to participate in this financing instrument do not sufficiently take into account our inherent vulnerabilities and lack of economic and climate resilience.
The Prime Minister explained the bottlenecks in accessing the vaccine under the COVAX arrangements, which disadvantages small countries, including SVG, and asked that this be corrected.
This has left the majority of CARICOM countries excluded based on the deeply flawed and lazy calculus of gross national income per capita. In addition, inclusion of all CARICOM member states in this financing instrument would only correspond to less than 0.1% of the population of the 92 countries proposed for coverage under COVAX AMC. We urge for this situation to be rectified.
The Prime Minister reminded the UN General Assembly of their purpose and urged the Assembly to execute its mandate, which is to address this and similar problems.
It is no secret that global crises, including health, financial and economic ones, affect those particularly susceptible to shocks more profoundly. Importantly, for the credibility of this General Assembly, we must live up to the ideals outlined in our COVID-19 Omnibus Resolution for a comprehensive and coordinated response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Let us go even further than that to which we have committed on paper and be reminded that we have an obligation to lift each other up and to lift humanity higher.
And Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Roger Duncan, said given the increased frequency of flights and the number of passengers entering the country is one of the challenges they have to deal with in managing the spread of COVID-19. Dr. Duncan, who along with Chief Medical Officer Dr. Simone Kaiser-Beach were panelists on the program on VC3 last evening, said the other challenge is when persons do not adhere to the COVID-19 protocols.
If you are to quarantine yourself for 14 days, that depending where you're coming from, you must spend 5 of these days in a approved facility. People still insist on wanting to move around. They still insist on wanting to have gatherings at the place. I mean, just this weekend, just on Sunday, we had to dispatch the police to a home where a guy who had just come out of his 5-day quarantine was having quite a bit of bashment going on his premises.
Party?
Well, I mean, and that's the thing about this. It's not just the people who are coming in. There are local people too who have been here who are really not paying attention that, look, my neighbor Tom Jones has just returned from the United States, or he just returned from England, and therefore I need to distance myself from him until his quarantine is complete. It's in your best interest as his neighbor. It's in his best interest too, so that he doesn't breach the quarantine protocols. And it's in the country's best interest. So I think that's the greatest problem, that was the challenge that we're having. The volume of people not adhering to protocols.
Noting that they were forced to take some persons to court for breaking these protocols, Dr. Duncan said the process in itself is a challenge because it is time-consuming when their officers have to go to court while they could be dealing with other matters. And Chief Medical Officer Dr. Simone Kiza Beach used the opportunity to explain why some persons have been testing positive for COVID-19 5 days later when they should have completed their mandatory quarantine in an approved hotel or guest house.
In some circumstances, it might be that we have a particular interest in the person. Is it that the person was in contact with a known positive, or is it that the person is in an environment that requires that we do increase surveillance and increased testing? We have quite a few protocols going on, and depending on your category, if you are high risk, say right now, unfortunately, some of our farm workers have been testing positive, and so you might be in a high risk job, or you might be in a situation where you are moving pretty early in your quarantine period, and we have to be extra cautious, and so we do increased testing. Or it might be that somebody turns up or complains during that period of not being well, and we test them again. So even though, strictly speaking, the majority of persons would be tested on day 5, and after that, as Dr. Duncan said, there's the temperature reporting. We advise persons, if they're not feeling well, to let us know. There are some groups where the protocol for them even being here requires that we test them further after the 5-day period.
As for the 72 hours PCR test required for incoming passengers, Dr. Beach said no airline should board a passenger who does not have the certificate or a booking to stay at an approved quarantine facility, especially those coming from countries in the high-risk category. It was further noted that while most airlines have been cooperating with the country's COVID-19 protocols, there is one in particular which they did not name that continued to be in breach. And St. Vincent and the Grenadines yesterday recorded 2 new COVID-19 cases, both non-nationals arriving from countries classified as high risk. The Ministry of Health said 1 case arrived with a negative PCR test result from the USA on December 7, 2020, and tested negative on both entry screening and day 5 testing. This person, however, tested positive on day 8 in quarantine. The other traveler arrived from the United Kingdom on December 12, 2020, with a negative PCR result and tested positive for COVID-19 on entry screening. The adult travelers will remain in isolation until cleared by 2 negative tests. Contact tracing and testing have commenced. This country has now recorded a total of 100 COVID-19 cases, 82 of which have recovered and 18 are active COVID-19 cases. The Ministry of Health is again underscoring the need for residents and guests of the importance of travelers, their families and friends to strictly comply with the requirements of quarantine for the entire period of quarantine. Persons in quarantine must not leave their homes unless authorized, nor should they entertain visitors or attend 9 Mornings activities. Residents of the Southern Grenadines are urged not to travel to Grenada and Carriacou at this time in view of the rapidly changing COVID-19 situation in these islands. Additionally, the ministry says that all contact with persons from these islands should take place only after they have been cleared by the local health authorities. Further, that all protocols and advisories, including the use of facial coverings, must be followed to reduce the risk of the introduction and subsequent spread of new COVID-19 cases in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. In other news, diabetics are at a greater risk than others of having gum diseases such as gingivitis, periodontitis, and advanced peritonitis, as well as a great possibility of having tooth decay. Head of Public Dental Services in the Ministry of Health, Dr. Brendan Richards, highlighted these issues as he spoke on the Diabetes Prevention and Control Program on the Facebook page of the Ministry of Health last evening. Dr. Richards said that dentists could detect that a person has diabetes by simply examining the mouth.
We also have a different taste of saliva, one that is sweetened, so that we often hear of the diabetic having a sweetened saliva. There may be cases of pockets between teeth that allow for food being packed. These pockets we call periodontal pockets. There are conditions of what we call acidosis, meaning that the bacteria that is in the system produces these extra acids that would demineralize or weaken the structure of the enamel and cause it to break into cavities or holes being formed. So the diabetic, in addition to having greater possibility of gum disease, also has a greater possibility of tooth decay.
He added that when a diabetic neglects taking care of their teeth, they would experience greater problems than a person who is not diabetic.
You will have cases where there are great infections and infections that continue unresolved, meaning that you keep having all of these infections popping out throughout the body, not just in the mouth but throughout the entire body, because though the blood is being pumped at the level of the heart, it goes through all of the extremities right down to your fingernails, so that you can have infections at every level. And when it comes to the mouth, you have infections at the level of the gums, infection at the level of the teeth, infections in the sinuses, infections in the bone itself. And some of these infections start as small abscesses, but then they become chronic. And as they become chronic abscesses and they are not resolved, these abscesses become cysts. And these cysts become greater problems that, if not dealt with over time, can lead to cancers.
Dr. Richard explained the process of how dentist treats a diabetic patient. He also used the forum to encourage diabetics to get their mouths checked regularly.
Extractions are done essentially in cases where they are absolutely necessary. So the idea would be to try and conserve the teeth themselves. If you can save the tooth, by all means you should. But if the tooth has been badly broken down, all the way down to the roots, then keeping that tooth in may cause more problems. May develop abscesses that are not resolved, facial swellings that complicate and that can cost the life of the patient. So when we're doing extractions for diabetics in particular, we want to make sure that their sugar levels are normalized, that the sugar is not too high, because if you go through with an extraction in a diabetic patient and that patient has a very high level of sugar in the blood, you can easily create a situation where after the extraction, the patient develops an infection.
A third batch of workers for the Canada Seasonal Agriculture Worker Program last Friday completed a period of training ahead of their departure next year. The training sessions, which are aimed at increasing the quality of workers provided for the program, dealt with such areas as work ethics and conflict resolution, leadership qualities, and teamwork. Facilitator Kesley Cambridge, who dealt with the sessions on group dynamics, outlined the reason for exposure to training in these areas.
The Ministry of Agriculture to have these different sessions, especially with these men who are possible candidates for the farming program. And the reason for the importance of group dynamics is because when it comes to working together, and for these gentlemen who are not related by blood, but would find themselves working together, it is very important that you understand the dynamics of the group, how it is that the group functions, and the different processes that are involved in the group activity. So group dynamics is very important, and it was good to see that these men, I think 25 plus men, were able to participate in this program, because they are now equipped with knowledge on how it is that they can interact effectively with each other to ensure that the group that they work with would be successful. So it is a really good initiative, and I really enjoyed it, and I know that the gentlemen would learn a lot from it.
The trainees said they were grateful for the training and have learned a lot, especially in areas of self-control, discipline, work ethics, and leadership qualities.
Doing a session here where you learn about ethics on the job and conflict resolution. It's something in your everyday life that you got to deal with, and this training seminar here teach you a lot about controlling your anger, dealing with other persons, and resolving conflicts, avoiding them.
And I learned a little bit from every skit that we did. Well, most importantly, my skit that we did. That's a big thing sometimes, because, you know, sometimes you need some help from someone you helped them before and you expect the same thing from them.
But I think it was very beneficial, because it will help us to know how to handle any situation, conflicts that may arise when we go outside to work.
The Ministry of Agriculture is targeting some 100 persons for training. There's been an increase in the number of containers with barrels shipped to St. Vincent and the Grenadines this month. So says Chief Operations Officer at the SVG Port Authority, Carl James. He told SVG-TV News that December has been a very busy month as workers at the port try to speed up the process of sorting barrels.
This year has not disappointed. As with previous years, we've noticed a significant increase in the number of containers and barrels that we're receiving. To date, we have received in excess of 100 containers, and we've done pretty well so far to strip these containers and deliver the cargo to our customers. In order to accommodate the customers and the higher increases that we're seeing, we've taken the decision to activate the geese compound. This compound is operating as a standalone area, meaning when you present yourself to the geese location, you can do all your processing in terms of customs payment and clearance with the Port Authority.
Government concessions on barrels started in May due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and James said while there's been a steady flow of barrels, they have seen an influx this month. He noted that safety protocols have been put in place, and this year more temporary workers have been employed.
This year we've hired in excess of 100 temporary workers, both male and female, and we have deployed them where we deem it necessary to ensure that we could maintain a high level of efficiency and a high level of quality customer service to our customers. We advise persons to maintain 3-foot separation between themselves and other customers when they're here. We have also installed tents at the Kingston location where we anticipate a large amount of customers and where we have the potential to have people clustered into a small space. We have installed tents on the outside support persons could line up, wait, and have appropriate social distancing without being exposed to the elements. So we have hand washing station installed, we have signage. So we've done several things to accommodate persons.
James is asking persons to have their barrels picked up at the earliest possible time. The Port Authority has put a hotline and WhatsApp number in place for persons to contact them.
I'd like to encourage persons to come and retrieve their cargo as promptly as possible, because the sooner they retrieve their cargo, the more space we're able to provide and be able to process the other containers sooner. If you have any questions with respect to your cargo, apart from touching base with your agent, you could always call the Port Authority's hotline, which is 451-2191, or you could shoot us a WhatsApp message at 533-0577.
The village of Korea will take on a festive atmosphere this Friday, December 18th, when its Nine Mornings Committee turns on the lights in that community. This will be done during a lighting ceremony, which will form part of a concert that will hear a message from guest speaker Pastor Ezra Kamabach of the Mesopotamia Kingdom Life Tabernacle. He will speak on the theme celebrating Christ, our fortress in a pandemic Christmas. Area Representative Sinclair Jimmy Prince and a member of the National Nine Mornings Committee will also deliver remarks, while performances will be done by a number of individuals and organizations, including churches in the area. Hans John and the Rose Hall Boom Jammers, the committee said there will be no morning activities this year, but some activities will take place on evenings. On Sunday, December 20th from 5 p.m., the committee will go house to house, serenading and delivering care packages to shortens in the area. The following day, Monday, December 21st, there will be an evening of carols at 7 p.m. where participants can receive giveaways with support from Sagicor. The committee will host a children's party on December 23rd from 6 p.m. with a special appearance by XS Steel Orchestra and Hans John. The Korean Nine Mornings Committee is asking persons attending its activities to follow the recommended health protocols in the battle against the COVID-19 pandemic. And Nine Mornings activities in Richland Park continued this morning with several performances, games, and other entertainment. Here is a snippet of some of the performances.
Girl, whole time I did thinking about them. All the time I say, girl. Well, you, watch your paper. Your number blank, you lose. Come. Me DJ, come. No hands. Pick it up from ground.
Move your body, me a beg you, no fish stop me, girl. You have this, no make the workplace a lot.
Vincentians who've traveled from different community to Richland Park said they were impressed with the lights and the activities thus far and would like to see more people get involved.
He said I passed through Richland Park and I saw the decor. I was really impressed with it. I decided, well, I have to come to Richland Park and really see the lighting up. And really, it's really a spectacular. I really enjoyed it. The Nine Morning, the festivity, the people are participating. I myself have been participating. As you see, I was on stage as well. So, Richland Park, I would really encourage people to come out to Richland Park and enjoy the Nine Morning.
Morning, I enjoyed everything, especially seeing all the kids them laughing and stuff. It's a joy. And here in Richland Park, I will encourage everybody to come out. It's a wonderful experience. Come out and laugh, your belly full. We always give a reason.
So put your hands together for Lakwa in the house. I'm in by the day. Merry Christmas.
This is the first time I'm coming. First time coming to Richland Park, light up. So enjoying it so far.
The Royal St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Force will stage its annual Police Cooperative Credit Union Christmas Caroling Contest on Friday, December 18, 2020 from 7 p.m. at the yard of the Central Police Station. The theme this year is Oh What a Year, Time to Spread Some Christmas Cheer. Senior defending champions, the Traffic Angels, will contend with 6 other choirs in defense of their title, while 7 other contenders will try to dethrone the junior champs Rose Hall Police Youth Club Carolers. The contest will also feature steel pan music and appearances by a number of local artists, including dancers, with a special guest appearance by the Gazetted Officers Choir. The police is strongly advising persons to adhere to the COVID-19 protocols by wearing a face mask. Temperature checks and hand sanitizing will also be done at the point of entry. Meanwhile, telecommunications company Flow has made a donation of cell phones to the police to be used as prizes in their caroling contest on Tuesday, December 15, 2020. Flow's collection agent, Joreen James, handed over 3 Samsung Galaxy smartphones to Assistant Superintendent of Police Junior Simmons, who is the coordinator of the police caroling contest. The phones will be given to winners in the impromptu segment of the contest. thanking Flo for its contribution. ASP Simmons said the Royal St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Force sees the activity as a way to give back to the public by spreading joy, love and Christmas cheer in the festive season. And the police said that their choir is once again seeking to warm the hearts of the public through song in their latest recording of the popular Christmas song, Give Love on Christmas Day. Choir Director Station Sergeant Orson Rodney explained that based on the positive feedback, support and goodwill the choir and the police force received when they recorded O Come All Ye Faithful in 2019, it was eager and enthusiastic about doing another production this year. The musical arrangements were done by Corporal 414 Renato Hendrickson and the recording put together at Carlos Sampson's studio. Members of the choir along with Commissioner Colin John shared with the staff and residents at the Louis Ponette home by donating a quantity of food and personal items to the institution. And the Royal St. Vincent and the Grenadines Auxiliary Police Force has paid tribute to Auxiliary Officer Sergeant Eva Thomas, who has marked 40 years of service to the institution. Thomas, who enlisted in September 1980, is said to have been among the first females to join the ranks of the auxiliary police. She has worked at different locations throughout the country and has been stationed at the Kingston Ward for the past 20 years as head of security. Thomas received commendations from Commissioner of Police Colin John, Commander of the Auxiliary Police Michael Charles, and the rank and file members of both the Royal St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Force and the Auxiliary Police Force. We do wish her all the best.